Hello, everyone. Welcome to Conversations with me, Manuel, where I host interactive sessions with interesting people in politics, media, religion, and many other fields. If you've never listened in, you're welcome, and I hope you can check the previous episodes. The first one I spoke with the 2019 senatorial candidate of the PDP in Lagos West, Gbadebo Rosevival. And lately, last week, I spoke with Vivian Chima, who is a journalist. We had an interesting conversation. This week, I spoke with Nigeria's Best. He is the co-host of the Nigerian Politics Weekly podcast. We spoke about the EndSARS movement, the security challenges in the country, and many other issues. Enjoy the conversation. Let's just jump right into it, since we already have some interesting stuff we're talking about. But as I said, the key things I would like to talk about: the security challenges in the country, and then the sudden Sunday ego and the whole cessation thing, which I know in the end it will always die down, but somehow they always come up again. And then the EndSARS aftermath. Apparently, no one knows where that is going to. But I know my honest opinion has always been that, one, they were shocked that such protests happened on a large scale, and now their response is to just keep quiet until it dies off.
No, they're in a very complicated situation because if you step back and ask yourself what is really going on, and you will find that the fundamental problem is the Nigerian state as it is was more or less designed by a group of army officers who took power in July 1966. This constitution, this country is their design, and the design is no longer working because they designed a state in which the military and a large proportion of the northern political elite held power through brute force and sometimes bribery, and everybody else was supposed to accept this arrangement. But what has happened over the years is, first of all, the population has grown. So we don't even have enough security forces to impose brute force on the whole nation. And secondly, because the economy is bad and the population has grown, they don't even have enough money as well to bribe as many people as possible. So what is then therefore happening is people are agitating, and the state doesn't have the capacity, both in terms of competence or money, to suppress the problems. So this is what is triggering all the crises that we seem to have every 2, 3 to 5 years, something new comes up. But these are just symptoms of the fundamental problem, which is the design of the Nigerian state is faulty.
So what are some of those designs that you think need to be tackled?
Well, the first step is, a lot of people talk about restructuring, and it's important because when Nigeria got her independence, we had a truly federal constitution, and a lot of the universities, the schools that our parents attended were a product of that constitutional freedom that the First Republic enjoyed. Like, I can give an example of my father. My father attended Edo College in the 40s to 50s. And Edo College was government owned, but it could rival schools in England or America in terms of the quality of the teaching and the intellect of the teachers. And what happened over time is the military came in, they mismanaged the economy, couldn't pay teachers, couldn't train teachers, and education has deteriorated since then. So you now find people who are graduates of universities in Nigeria who cannot even construct basic sentences. So that has affected their employment prospects and their general life chances. So these are some of the, so education is one example that has collapsed. Healthcare is another example. Many, many years ago, people were being born in Nigeria. It wasn't a death sentence to go to a Nigerian hospital. But these things are changing. So healthcare is collapsing, education is collapsing, security is collapsing. So these are all symptoms, again, of this faulty design. So if we don't fix the design, we risk an implosion of the country.
I would honestly agree with you when it comes to the education sector. I visited a couple of government secondary schools and primary schools, and even the infrastructure there is just messed up. And you ask yourself, how can students learn in such horrendous conditions? And then you look at something that has always bothered me is I don't know if I would call it the quota system when it comes to admissions into universities. You see that some states you have a lower cutoff because it's assumed that the standard of education or learning there is poor compared to other states. And then you have someone from, say, Abia State who had 198, and someone from, say, Taraba 98. And because the competition in Abia State is sort of high, or is higher compared to Taraba, the one who had 98 gets the admission because the cutoff for Taraba is lower. But the one from Abia State who had 198 won't, because there are others from his state who probably had 360. And so in the end, you're not having those who are well qualified in that sense. I don't know if that makes sense to you.
Oh yes, I understand the point you are making. That's one of the challenges Nigeria faces. For historical reasons, education in the North has not been as developed as it is in the South. And funny enough, the education in the South is still terrible, as you know.
Absolutely, yeah.
The parents attended are not the same quality schools that we attended.
True.
But still, it's better than what is happening in the North. Now, if you had a government that had what I would call thinking people, you would say, rather than lower the standard for people to attend university, you should focus at the nursery, primary, and secondary level so that we are skilling up northern students so that they can pass exams to enter university at the competitive level. I mean, I went to university in England. We all did A levels. Every university, especially if you go to what they call the Russell Group universities, they have a standard where they think before we can admit you, we need to know you're able to academically meet a standard. So universities like Ibadan or ABU or University of Benin also have their standard. But if you're forcing them to lower it to admit a student, then obviously it's going to impact the quality of the university experience, because there's the biblical saying that iron sharpens iron. So sometimes students become more intelligent, not just because of their teachers, but because of the quality of the other students in the classroom. Now, if a professor is having to devote more time to teaching somebody the basic stuff because they haven't learned it at secondary school, then the quality of everybody's education goes downhill. Even the university itself loses its reputation because the quality of the students are not at the level they should be. So my view is, I agree that there's a problem in the North with regards to education, but the solution is not to lower admission standards. The solution is to focus on the quality of teaching at nursery, primary, and secondary levels.
Absolutely, I would agree with you there. It's dealing with it at the roots. But again, when I look at, say, appointments in Nigeria generally, you look at the Ministry of Education, you look at the health sector, and I think a couple of years ago, when was it, Dora Akunyele, in, I think it was Jonathan's administration, she was part of those nominated for confirmation by the Senate, and she studied pharmacy. She was a pharmacist, and even before the portfolios were distributed, the medical doctors were already revolting that we do not want a pharmacist to head the health sector. We want a medical doctor. Now, I would agree with that in a sense that, okay, we should have a medical administrator. But you look at other ministries, say the education, and those that we have heading it, the ministers, even all through their career, they haven't really been involved in the education sector. I've forgotten the name of the current minister, but if my memory serves me right, he was a journalist, and I've looked at his background and all that. He had nothing to do working in the education ministry. So why is it that some of these sectors or ministries that should be important, we do not have the right people who are manning them?
I would agree that for many of our ministries, in particular education, the gentleman you're referring to is Adamu.
Adamu, yeah, thank you.
Yes, I agree that he's not qualified to be Minister for Education, but I hold that view not because he has no experience of being a professor or a teacher, because when you look at the successful countries in the world, for example, England and Britain or America, many of their education secretaries have not been people who were teachers, because at that level, at the level of minister, your job is not to be a professor or a teacher.
Absolutely.
Your job is to develop policy. So it doesn't, in my view, it doesn't really matter whether you're a teacher or not a teacher. The real question is, have you initiated and implemented sensible policies to help education get better? And sadly, the answer is no. I can use the example of my daughter, for example. I have a young daughter who is in a school in the village where I live in England. The interesting thing about the school is it's owned by the church, but funded by the government. Now, the government doesn't have a minister sitting somewhere controlling the money. They transfer the money for each school to a board of governors. The board of governors is made up of people from the church and parents and people from the local community. So they are the ones that manage the school budget. They hire the head teacher and hire all the other teachers in the school. And because the people in the community have an interest in making the school good, the school has one of the highest, has the highest rating. It's rated outstanding, which in England means the top rated school. But you can see how it's managed locally. So if I were education minister, I would go to England or go to America and say, okay, look, what policies have you guys implemented to make your schools good? And when I see that they've done this with schools in England, I would go back and do the same. So schools, old prestigious schools like Edo College or King's College or even Queen's College, I won't waste time trying to run the school from Abuja. I'll say no, set up a board of governors. 50% of them will be made up of maybe old boys of the school, old girls of the school, and the other 50% made up of parents. And every year you say, okay, the budget for Edo College is 10 million naira. You guys, here's the 10 million. You guys run the school yourselves. You can even raise money from donations. Our only job will be to conduct inspections from time to time. And I'll give you an example, a practical example. There were two schools that used to be rivals in Lagos many, many years ago. You had St. Gregory's and you had King's College. St. Gregory was handed back to the missionaries, I think about 5 to 10 years ago. And if you look at St. Gregory's now, it is now a fantastic school. Then you look at King's College, Lagos, that has remained with the government, with the same structure that it used to have. King's College is now a shadow of its former self. You have many alumni of the school who go around shouting Floriat, Floriat. We went to King's College. But none of them can send their kids to those schools. And for me, that is the test of the education sector. In England or in America, you have generations who boast that my child went to the University of London, I went to the University of London, my grandfather went to the University of London. It's a thing of pride for them. But in Nigeria, you cannot find a single person who can sit down and boast that I went to King's College and my children and great-grandchildren are also going to go to King's College, Lagos, because nobody's going to do that. So sorry for talking for too long, but my view is it's not really about whether the minister is a teacher or a professor. It's about the quality of the policies that he introduces.
Absolutely. I'll agree with you that, yes, the person doesn't have to be a teacher or professor, but my point is, at least it has to be someone who has been involved in the sector in a sense that